Meeting of the Plan Commission for August 5th to order. We do have quorum, so we will get started. We did have one registrant, but it looked like it was a mistake. It looked like it was intended to be for council meeting last night. So then that brings us to disclosures and recusals. Does anyone have a disclosure or recusal under the city's ethics code? Seeing no hands raised, then we will get right to the item of special business. And the discussion is on possibilities, and we won't be making any final decisions now, but I would like to get a sense of the body on each one of the 12 items that I had sent out back in July. So there's those 12 items. And then Alder Rummel, who can't be here tonight, added two more. One, don't read in consent items. The TPPB apparently simply indicates the Legistar number, and then she also suggested having the public hearing be noticed for earlier so that we wouldn't have to have a pause before the public hearing, so maybe at 5:35 or something like that. She also suggested offline that things not be considered, applications not be considered unless they are complete, indicating, and I think she has a point here, that if the applications are not complete, like on a traffic plan or whatever, it makes it more challenging to really go ahead and address the application. So it's the 12 that I sent out to you, plus the 3 additional ones that we will be discussing. So I would like to open it up for comment on the items that we have on the list. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I didn't understand your last. Are these something that came in addition to the 2 that Alder Rummel sent earlier in the week?
Alder Rummel sent 2 earlier in the week, so I mentioned those 2. And then she also, we talked this afternoon, and she indicated the possibility of requiring that the application be complete. So mentioning the possibility that there would be some kind of traffic study that would be needed. And if that's not done, then it makes it very difficult to review the application adequately. Or something like a shadow study that's not done that is needed in order to complete a review. So that was one other thought.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Is that all you had, Alder Heck, right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, thanks. And as one of the people who instigated this by raising concerns, I'm glad that we're doing this, and I hope that we can make some real headway. I may have some additional suggestions as well. Hopefully that's still in order.
Sure.
I do really like, okay, thanks. I do really like the idea of reading just the Legistar numbers for the consent agenda. That's probably going to save us 5 minutes every meeting, and those add up. So that's all good. So what I see as the big issue is the way that we hold our hearing. I think there are things that we can do around the edges on other things like the Legistar, maybe some of these other things. But the purpose of hearings on proposals is to get information in order to apply the standard. But that isn't how it gets approached often, and I think we've left ourselves open to this. Often it is approached by people on either side of the proposal as the more people I can get in to say the same thing over and over, it will show that there's a lot of feeling, and often it's repetitive, or it may not address the standard at all. I mean, the one on Langdon last time, where we had a bunch of trades union folks talking about the jobs, I mean, that was irrelevant to the standards that we are doing. So I'm not sure that I'm in love with any of the 12 that were in here, particularly the one that was like limiting non-action items to 30 minutes. I mean, I think we need to talk more about policy, not less, because the policy stuff gets shoehorned into these project level discussions and where it doesn't really fit. And I know when I've gone on and on about, say, TDM stuff, it's because there isn't, we haven't had a place to talk about it otherwise. So I have a couple suggestions after reading this and thinking about it. And also talking to people who are on other boards and committees. For example, I just talked to a friend who's on the school board, and they have a number of very contentious things going on. New superintendent, 2 new superintendents in the last 9 months or 6 months, whatever. Cops in schools, referenda. And I said, you guys I don't watch many school board meetings, but you guys must just get like overwhelmed by comments. And it's like, no, we don't. We don't have live comments. They're available, but most people email. And I really like getting comments in advance that I can look at and think about, rather than the 3-minute, can you hear me? And repetitive stuff. So my first thought is, if we could organize pre-meeting comments better, rather than just have them sort of in random order, but have something where people can fill out a form that's for or against the project, or neither for nor against, and could concisely state their case, maybe even put in supporting materials that we could go through. Now that would require some, organizing of that up front, but hopefully you do it once and then we get the benefit of that on an ongoing way. Then maybe we don't have to have 3 minutes for everybody to talk. Maybe we could shorten those presentations, allowing time for questions where they're needed. But if the 30th person comes on and says the project's going to create more jobs, they don't need 3 minutes for that. I mean, I would cut that back to 1 minute or even shorter. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about in terms of the hearings, making the hearings more valuable so we actually get input and information that we can use against the standards, and not get bogged down in people trying to flood the zone with just 1,000 different people saying the same thing or whatever. And a couple other things, I would cut off registration at the start of the meeting so people don't dribble in, as the thing is going on. Allow the chair to cut off speakers who aren't addressing the standards, or at least remind them that they should be addressing the standards. If there's a reference in here to being more like a legislative hearing, and legislators don't put up with people just coming in and yammering. They cut them off if they're not talking, to the point. So that's my big suggestion, is to manage the input that we get from the public in a more useful way. I think there'd be another sub part of that, is to manage how the proposal team is is doing their pitch, having it sort of disconnected between 3 or 4 people. I know that's trying to be fair and get everybody the same 3 minutes, but it doesn't really work very well. It just gets in the way. So maybe in a way that they could combine their time, and you just say we're going to have 5 minutes for the proposal team to do their thing, and then cut them off. That's my main suggestion, is to manage those better. I have a couple other suggestions I could come back to if we want to talk more about, like, the debate and things like that. See what people think.
Well, do you want to mention anything else while you've got the floor, or do you want to?
Well, sure. Although I think that's the bulk of it. Really, that's the thing that drives me the craziest, is sorting the wheat from the chaff when we get these long hearings. But I do think that the notion of maybe cutting people off in debate after a couple of goes is useful, although I don't know how that works with us, because most of our discussion is in the form of questions. We end up asking staff questions. So it's not like there's usually not even a motion yet when we go. And by the time we get to the motion, we're kind of exhausted and just don't have much more to say. So how that would work, particularly if we were asking questions to applicants and other members of the public who are speaking, it doesn't kind of neatly fit the council model, where it's really mostly just debate. But I would be in favor of some way of doing that too. And I also think we could also be better about calling staff in advance with our particular questions, so we don't have to air them out in front of everyone. Some of them are easily dealt with by staff in advance. And I know sometimes we want to ask our questions for rhetorical purposes so that everybody hears the answer, but we don't always have to do that. It'd be nice not to have to do that all the time. So those are my thoughts, and I'm sorry that I didn't submit them earlier to be folded into this, but
no, that's fine. Okay. Okay, Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I like Marcia Rummel's first 2 suggestions. I think those are really good. The other one, I guess the third one that you mentioned, I think I'd like staff's input on that. I think I support that, because in most cases, I think we get most of the items that are ready for action. But in rare cases, I think there are things that we're waiting on UDC to act on certain things, but I guess I'd like Heather to respond to that. I agree with Commissioner Sundquist that having people speak to the standards, I think, is important. And having the chair, politely say, could you address the standards? And hopefully we can get the standards to individuals so that they know, what we'll be deliberating on. So I think that's important. I guess going down the list, the first item that was on your list, having the commission hold a public hearing on one meeting and then listen to public testimony and then act on it at a future meeting. I guess I wouldn't be in favor of that, because I think that I like to have the hearing, having the information fresh in my mind, and having the discussion and questions of staff at a meeting and then act on it. I think I would rather have that as we have it right now, rather than going to another type of process. So I wouldn't be in favor of item number 1 that you listed. And if you want me to go down to some of the other ones, I can. But if you want, each of the commission to review each of those items that you suggested, that would be fine. What would you prefer?
If you have a perspective on each one of those, because then it will help
Okay.
get the sense of the body. I did hear from Alder Lemmer and Rummel about them too. So yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Item 2, having staff kind of look at the agenda and possibly move items that they feel that are very controversial, not to have them all on one night, to have them separated maybe in the future. I hope that, staff and maybe the chair are currently doing that so that that you could do that, because I think that having 2 or 3 very controversial items means a very late meeting. And again, maybe having people speak to the standards, it would cut out a lot of discussion. But I do think that, and I hope that staff is doing that. But I know that's kind of difficult, because sometimes when you set the public hearing or have a neighborhood meeting and indicate the public hearing is on such and such a date, that's difficult. But I hope that, again, we can do that. Item number 3. I don't quite know what that is. I guess I'm assuming that staff put that one in, having only 1 intake per month rather than 2.
Yes, they did, and perhaps we can get Heather to explain that one a little bit more too.
Okay.
So after you've finished going through.
Okay. My only concern with that one is that might excessively delay projects, which I'm concerned about. So I don't know if we need to do that. But anyway, Heather can further explain that one. Item 4, limit informational non-action items to 30 minutes.
So those would be.
I hope that.
Like on
I would hope that staff could do that, and that having a comprehensive plan items or neighborhood plan items on the same night that we have, a number of public hearings, I would hope that we could kind of spread those out, because those are not as time sensitive as some of the other things that we review. So I guess I would be supportive of that. Limit the number of times and length of commissioner can speak. I guess I don't know if we have a problem there with this commission. So I guess if other people, commissioners feel that that's a problem, then I'd be interested in hearing them. But I don't know if we have a problem, at least with this group. Number 6, I like number 6, the sub A. And I would suggest, instead of 10 o'clock, maybe 10:30, the chair could ask for a motion to adjourn, and that if we did have some time-sensitive items that the commission needed to review and act on, we could discuss that. But that may be an appropriate approach. So anyway, I think that we could consider that one. Number 7, rule to automatically refer an item that has taken a lot of time. I guess, again, I don't support that, because I think that if we started an item for review and having a public hearing and discussion and comments, I think that we should act on it and just get it off our plate. And I know that sometimes we refer items, but I think that my preference is to just complete the item rather than to forward to a future meeting. Number 8, schedule an extra meeting. I guess I would hopefully that we wouldn't have to schedule extra meetings for our agenda load. I 2 meetings, and we're having study sessions now and other meetings. I think that I would prefer that we just stick with our schedule rather than than having extra meetings. And number 9, start the Plan Commission meeting earlier. I guess I have concerns with starting the meeting earlier because I think from the public standpoint, I think that having the meeting start at 5:30 is good for the general public because sometimes they work until 4:30 or 5, and it may be difficult to get to a meeting. You know, with having Zoom, it's easier, obviously, because all they have to do is tune in. But when we're over the pandemic, I think that having meetings at 5:30 is probably a good thing. Number 10, provide better clarification regarding the 3 minutes speaking rule. If technically possible, I think that I would be supportive of this, but I don't know if we save a lot of time in that. Again, I think if the chair indicates that people have to speak to the standards, because many times we have public comment that has no bearing on what we act on. So I think that that probably would save more time than that item. On number 11, always take questions from commissioners, the registrants at the end of the speaker. The chair is doing that now, and I'm very supportive of that because I think that does save some time, and sometimes the questions are resolved through future speakers. So I think that the chair is doing that. I think that's a good thing. Number 12, reduce the number and types of proposals that require Plan Commission review. And again, staff and the commissioner are currently looking at that, and I think that's good, and hopefully that will be fruitful in some of the items that we review now. We won't have to review in the future. So again, those are the comments I wrote down. I think Commissioner Sundquist does have some interesting points, and I guess I would think that we should further discuss those as well. So those are mine. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I didn't write down my thoughts, point by point, and I didn't have any really strong feelings about a lot of things. I do agree. I guess we don't have to read all of the consent agenda items. I'm not sure about starting the public hearing earlier than what's advertised. I don't know if that's...
We could advertise it as 5:35. I mean...
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So it would be noticed then at 5:35.
Okay, good. I just wanted to, make sure that we weren't...
Right.
People that plan to be there at a certain time can be there and start. I didn't want to leave people in the dust. I agree. I wasn't sure about the extra meetings since we're having these extra policy meetings. And, with scheduling extra meetings, I didn't know if that would cause some confusion or frustration with members of the public that are sort of, if they're aware that Plan Commission meetings happen at a certain time, but now there's special meetings happening. That was my only thought with regard to that. And then I had a question, without really knowing how school board meetings go, can we say, like, if you already emailed comments, you don't have to come and talk or, something like that without limiting the interaction with the public. I don't want to do that so much. And then question for staff. Are we allowed to contact staff with specific questions before the Plan Commission meetings? I wasn't sure, if we're allowed to have that kind of communication. Thank you.
And yes, we definitely can have that kind of communication. Heather, do you want to speak to, and then I will get to you next, Alderheck. Could you speak a little bit to the one that you had put in about the one intake deadline?
Yeah, and I should credit Kevin. This was an idea, a creative idea that he thought of. So just some background on that. I mean, over the years, what we've really strived for within the development review section is predictability on all sides of, with regard to the schedule for development review. Right now, we have approximately a biweekly deadline for submittals that coincides exactly with meetings 6 to 10 weeks later, based on whether it goes to the Urban Design Commission, et cetera. And so we have a very detailed calendar that development teams and staff reviewing the project, which, as a quick tangent, the staff reviewing projects include far more than just the planning division. So it's a sort of a carefully orchestrated interagency machine with regard to reviewing the development proposals. It includes, 6 to 10 agencies, depending on the proposal. And so that calendar is something that we've put a lot of care and feeding in over the years to maintain. And again, right now, a certain submittal deadline coincides with certain meeting dates. And so what this suggestion would do would be to cut in half, basically, the number of submittal dates so that we just have a monthly submittal date. And then it would give staff some opportunity to sort of sift those applications that come in, make our best estimated guess as far as what's going to take the most time, what needs, more time for review, et cetera, and try to basically populate 2 meetings among one submittal date, if that makes sense. So we keep the Plan Commission meetings the same. And we haven't thought this through fully. We wanted some thoughts from the Commission first. I think we would need to take this back to staff from other agencies and make sure that there's a clear and clean path forward to doing this. But again, the general thought would be have an opportunity to take a larger batch of applications and to have choices as far as which meeting, which Plan Commission meeting they go to. And in doing so, we would have to change the expectations of applicant teams. And I think we could do that with enough advance notice. We could say, if you get your application in by X, your meeting will be held on Y or Z date. That would have to be in our written materials in advance. And then we'd have to work with each applicant team to sort of determine which meeting date they had. We'd have to do the public notices accordingly. So it would take quite a bit of work, but it could help us avoid, a situation where we have one virtually, one packed meeting with 5 or 6 controversial items, and then the next meeting lasts a half an hour or something. It could avoid those situations. And then I wanted to give a little bit of space here for Kevin and Tim, who are so deeply involved with the process. If you have any other thoughts to add on kind of the origin of this, and I guess, Kevin looks. Kevin,
do you want to speak to that?
I think this was trying to get at the same idea that Commissioners Sundquist and Cantrell had mentioned about trying to get a manageable number of projects at a meeting. It's just very difficult once staff accepts an application as being complete and we schedule the public hearings. I know for the last couple of meetings we worked with a development team to the extent we could and tried to have people voluntarily move to different items. But this was just a way to try to give us some tools to do that up front. But it was basically getting at the same idea versus when things come in and, when you're a couple weeks out from a hearing and notices and then trying to shift things around. There are some concerns, as Heather mentioned. This is setting it up and expectations, and it's not an easy lift by any means. I think looking at the matrix that you had, there's a lot of complexities that go in with something like this. But I would put this in that same bucket of ideas as to ways that we can help manage and set those agendas with a little more flexibility up front. So we can explore this a little bit further if we get a nod from the commission.
It sounds like it would provide better opportunity, really, to do that kind of balancing that we're looking for. So I think it sounds like a really good idea.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say very quickly, I think the one thing would be setting the expectation that if you're submitting on this date, and again, these are your 2 meeting dates, but you wouldn't be guaranteed the first one. So again, we'd have to work carefully with all of our different partners, the development community, the neighborhood associations, elected officials, and so forth, just because this would be a significant change to the kind of the way that schedule is implemented.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parks.
If I could share my screen, we can visit the inner sanctum of the planning department and show the plan commission how. Jesse, can you allow screen sharing, please? Well, this is no fun. Okay, here we go. Every couple of weeks, we create a running list of projects that I'm actually pleased to say is now actually only down to 2 11 by 17 inch pages, which track all the information that is relevant to not only planning staff, but the other agencies that we work with that Heather mentioned in her comments. And one of the things that jumps out at me, not as a point counterpoint to whether any of the things on the list are good or bad ideas, is just to kind of bring to light, the coordination that occurs between planning staff and other agencies. We tell them when their comments are due back and, when things were submitted. But one of the things that is important to note, and you see it sometimes on your agendas, is that we have projects that get referred for myriad reasons. And a lot of them are beyond the Plan Commission's control. They're beyond staff's control. They can be alder-based requests for referral. They can be actions that other commissions have to take, not just urban design. Right now, we have 2 pending applications that are not coming to the Plan Commission because they're awaiting an action by the Landmarks Commission. Applicants request referrals for countless reasons. And so I just bring those up, not to say that, anything is a good or a bad idea, but to point out that there are things beyond the Plan Commission's control that we start meting out, okay, you're a light project, you're a heavy project, we're going to have so many light, so many heavy projects on an agenda. There are aspects of that decision that we lose control of once we get other agencies involved, other commissions involved, vacation scheduling involved, travel. Back when people did that sort of thing, could impact when people would be able to be present for a Plan Commission meeting. So there's a lot of ingredients that go into what you see on a given Monday evening that I just wanted to share, in addition to providing some perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I guess one thing that I first want to say is with regard to what Commissioner Sundquist was saying and others agreeing about how to focus people on standards of approval and how that could be so beneficial, and that the chair could whip people into shape if they stray. And in my mind, that sounds impossible. That, people have different speaking and ways of developing their arguments, and they might not get to their punchline about the standard of approval until you're cutting them off. We could do more education at the beginning of every meeting about that, but it sounds like a tough task. But there could be some improvement.
Thank you, Alder Heck. I think it sounds like a challenge too. Anyway, yeah, thank you.
But I wanted to also, I was thinking when there was the item about, letting people only speak 10 minutes or something like that, commissioners. I guess I feel in a couple of instances lately, I've really taken up a lot of time speaking about a couple of proposals. And that's because I'm an alder, which is a kind of a different animal. And I have to, I was in both those circumstances. This would be on East Wash and on Langdon. I felt like the neighborhoods hadn't quite come together and done all the work of evaluating the proposal and getting and working with the development team, and vice versa. And so I felt like I had to do that because I represent that area, and I'm sure it was annoying, and it took up a lot of time. But you're stuck with alders on plan commission, particularly some of us who have a fair amount of development. So I would probably not like limiting how much time people can talk. And I don't really think most of us do. In those circumstances, I have a couple of times, but generally no. But I apologize for that. But really, alders have also, I think, a tendency probably to ask, maybe Commissioner Sundquist mentioned this, more rhetorical questions, perhaps, in order to make sure that, well, in these circumstances, I know I asked a lot of rhetorical questions because I wanted to make sure commissioners had thought about all these particular items. So it can get pretty long-winded. So I wonder if I could screen share, because I used the handy grid that was sent out to us, and I thought that was super helpful, and it might help me focus as I talk to you about how I did this. I don't really know how
Our tech facilitator has to give you the permission to screen share. So,
Jesse?
Yeah, everyone should have access to that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just hit that screen share button, it should be on the bottom of your app.
Mine's right in the middle, and it's green.
Oh, share screen. Got it. Okay, I'm looking for my grid. Is it this one? I've got so many windows open that now I can't tell what's what. I think I got it. Okay, the grid, you can see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go to full screen so you can see it. So I added some colors to my grid. If it's black, I took all the things in reduced form that were the 12 plus the couple that Marcia had sent in advance. And I know we've talked about a couple of other things. And I color coded them. If they're black, it was like, well, could work. Red, I worried about predictability impact that we've heard about, that like developers or neighbors or anybody that, it's like, whoa, they're not going to know what's going on. And blue was not good for the public, and green was my own opinion, just not good. So, but I found there were a lot of low impact items on the list that were relatively easy. And I'd like number 9 in the green there under low impact, start plan commissions earlier. I just decided that's not worth it because I'm still going to be brain dead after 6 hours. So I wrote brain dead still. And so there's a lot of small things that seem to me pretty easy to do. Maybe they'd add up to, on average, taking a half hour out of each plan commission meeting, but they don't do anything about the big intense issues. And the ones that would have significant impact that we've mentioned, I have kind of red and blue over there, 6, 7, 8, because I felt like predictability was impacted, and it's not good for the public if they have to come to 2 meetings. It's not good for the developers to have to come to 2 meetings in some ways, in my opinion, but still some potential. Like number 8, schedule extra meeting when staff is aware there may be several controversial items. As an alder, I don't know when I could, if having extra meetings is very difficult for me because I just don't have openings Monday through Thursday evenings very often. So for the alders, I think that would be kind of problematic. And if I go down a little bit more to the items that seemed like they would maybe take more work on by staff or even require the city attorney's office, I guess that the one in the lower right corner that I was worried about not being good for the public was separating public input from decision making, because then they have to come twice if they want to listen, and maybe they don't want to listen to the debate. Maybe they only want to give their 3 minutes, but and then so I guess in some ways it would be really easy to take those low impact items and cut some things out relatively easily, I think, and on average. But I really think that tackling the ones that can keep us from going 6 hours or 8 hours are probably the most important. And those are the significant impact items like 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. And I find them all a little bit problematic, except for maybe those intermediate ones, 2 and 3, that we've discussed, that don't cause problems either in terms of predictability or the public. So that's kind of where I was on that stuff. I don't need to go on and read them all. So that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hagenow, you were, okay. Commissioner Hagenow.
No, I'm in. Obviously, I think we're all probably in full agreement that shortening meetings or finding a way to do that is a good idea. And I think most of us would agree that finding meaningful ways of really reducing that is problematic and just it's going to be difficult. Certainly the low-hanging fruit, I think of like item number 3, having the one intake deadline and allowing staff to then kind of have a better idea of the schedule. That may be a very good idea, and it might help break up some of those really long meetings. I don't know that I necessarily want to go through all of these. One thing that kind of had popped into my head, this it was item number 6, kind of a hybrid of that, and item number 7, where we're coming up with maybe a time frame of, hey, we know that this topic or this agenda item is going to take longer than, or we want to max it out at an hour and a half or 2 hours, and that's it. And then if we allow the developers and the public maybe to know that ahead of time, that we're going to automatically refer items that hit the 2 hour mark to the following meeting or something along those lines. I think it would have the impact. I know from the public standpoint, it may seem a little unfair, but I think from the developer standpoint, it may make them a little more willing on the front end to maybe work with the neighborhoods and work with our the planning staff to come up with a project that's not as divisive or contentious when it finally does get to us. They may, maybe they'll take that extra floor out beforehand if they know that they, from a financing standpoint or whatever, that they've got this deadline and they've got to get it done in this meeting, or else they're going to be putting the whole project at risk possibly, or something like that. So I kind of like trying to find a way to tweak that a little bit, and if everybody knows it going into it, I think that could work. Yeah, I guess that's all I've got right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Just a couple of things in terms of the one intake deadline. That is, coming from the end of being one that would put together those submittals, that is definitely a big change. And, it's a large packet of items you need to put together. So the thought of maybe missing one thing and then having to wait another month would be difficult. But, if you communicated it, people would adapt to it eventually. And I know that staff has always been really mindful of things that are on deadline, like a new affordable housing project. So I'm sure that could be communicated. And I was always also thinking of things that are kind of referred and may require a resubmittal of updated plans, if those could be submitted in the interim, if we went to the one, monthly submittal, so that you're not essentially waiting like 2 months for something to come back, that would be good. Also, I don't think I agree with Commissioner Hagan on the 2-hour time limit for an item. I think that it would give a lot of, power to people that want to show up to oppose, and they should certainly be heard, but would lead to a strategy of refer, delay, just delay a project by continuing to show up. And in terms of the 3-minute speaking rule, I think Chair Zellers has done a really good job of reminding people of that. I think a shot clock could actually maybe encourage people to just use their full 3 minutes instead of cutting off earlier. I do think we could also limit question responses from the development team. Sometimes they take a little advantage of that and go on items not related to what you asked about. There's been a few of those recently. Mm-hmm. And maybe grouping the development team into one time chunk versus 3 minutes per, architect, engineer, et cetera, would be good. I also, in terms of focusing questions on the standards of approval, I agree that seems extremely difficult. And we have a lot of people that show up to our meetings that are extremely well educated about the standards and projects, can point to plans. And that's pretty incredible. But I also don't want to discourage people that would normally not show up to our meetings or participate, don't understand the standards, which is completely normal to not, be aware of how we approve things. And I just want to make sure that people, would still feel comfortable showing up and commenting, even if they're not exactly citing a specific standard. I think that's all. I agree with some of the little things on Alder Heck's grid. He gets a gold star for that completed grid. Some of the easy things to do, like starting the public hearing earlier, and that Marcia suggested, and not reading into the item. So it seemed like no-brainers. That's all I have.
I'd like to hear from people. The idea was floated about cutting off registrations at the start of the meeting. What are people's? I'm seeing several nodding heads. Yes. Okay. No, I see one no. Did you want to speak to that, Alder Heck? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. I think it has some merit, but as long as we're dealing with virtual meetings and varying degrees of comfort with technology, I think it would cut some people out of the process who are simply not capable of getting on to Zoom and registering properly. And I think if we had in-person meetings, I would say too bad, and I would agree with what you're saying, but I'm a little nervous about it with virtual meetings.
Okay. Commissioner Sundquist.
Coming back to some of these things that I think people have really pointed out. I like Alder Heck matrix, that it was exactly, maybe the details weren't exactly the same as I was thinking of them, but yes, the marginal ones are easy, and really making that is hard. I guess I just encourage us to think about the hard ones a little more. I really, as Mr. Solheim just pointed out, the artificial deadlines and cutting things off in the middle at 10:30 or something, I think will get gamed, and we'll just add additional time. And for the reason she gave, I'm really not in love with those. I think it's really got to be, let me make another pitch. I didn't get, and maybe it's going to go nowhere, but I've been doing these hearings for a long time. I do not think that 3-minute serial presentations are really effective public engagement. It discourages people who can't meet that format, who work a double shift or work a shift at night, whether it's a double shift or not, and can't be here during our meeting, who don't have the technology, who don't have the patience. It is sort of a fig leaf for real engagement of the public, and it is often not helpful in bringing to light information that we need to apply the standards. When I meant like we need to look at this, have the standards be the centerpiece of this. It's not necessarily that members of the public are going to take that yellow sheet and speak directly to it like they've been trained to, which is too much to expect. We do want information that's generic, germane to the standard. Too often we don't get it, and when we hear it the 40th time, it's not any new information. So I think we should really think about what level of public engagement we're getting out of those hearings, and really be critical of our process, because it's too easy just to say we're opening the door and whoever shows up can talk for 3 minutes and that's democracy and that's public engagement. It's not. It wastes time. It distracts us from actually having the conversations we need to have. It obscures the actual information we need to have. And I think we should be really forthright about that. And if, somebody will say cutting back the amount of time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes or something is an affront to democracy, but it's really not if we provide a more efficient way that people could have input. And again, I think that's upfront in advance where we can think about it and read it, and maybe ask questions if they show up, or ask questions by email. One of the things that would be really helpful, I think, is that if agendas were out earlier, the members of the public are often responding to things like, unless they're getting the postcard and they're in the neighborhood and they're in the loop already, they don't know what's on the agenda until Friday afternoon, and only if they happen to think to go refresh the Legistar. So to me, this is not just a time-saving thing. It's partly that, but it's also a criticism of kind of the lazy assumption that we all make that if we just open the door and let people have 3 minutes, that counts as public.
Thank you. Attorney Strange is with us, and he's going to have to be leaving shortly. I'm wondering two things. If anybody has any questions for Attorney Strange, or if you have anything that you would like to add to the discussion or bring up. So I'm looking for hands for questions for Attorney Strange. I'm not seeing any hands. Do you have anything, John, that you would like to share with us?
Sure. I'll just to comment a little bit on what Commissioner Sundquist just said. One of the things that the Task Force on Government Structure found was that our boards, commission, committee system was originally set up to be this robust forum of participatory democracy, and it's really not that. And part of it is this 3-minute issue of us assuming that that's enough time for people to have meaningful engagement with the people who are making the decisions. Two things I would point out. One is the 3-minute rule is in 3301 sub 7 sub E. There's nothing that you can do to reduce that. The rule says if they go through the process, they sign up like they're supposed to, they get 3 minutes to speak on an item. And so I think it does fall then to sort of working with them to make that 3 minutes, at least within the context that we're currently working, make that 3 minutes as meaningful as possible to the commission. Now that rule could be looked at over the course of the next year or so, in terms of the work that the council is doing, is examining some of the issues that were brought up by the task force. The other thing I would point out is the pandemic has actually forced the city to become a little bit more willing to take comment in other ways. than the 3 minutes. It used to be that unless you showed up and filled out a form and gave you 3 minutes, you couldn't provide that sort of comment to the commission or to the council. And now there's actually ways to email your information. So I think kind of capitalizing on some of what Commissioner Sundquist and others have said is making that, making the public aware that that is an option. And that's an option that we're now a little more accommodating to than we were before. So that's all. I think it's just that pointing out that the 3 minutes, you're kind of stuck with that until that rule changes. But that there are some things you can try to do to work with it, and I think encouraging other forms of engagement where the pandemic has allowed us to do that.
I do have a question. What's your perspective on the chair cutting people off if it does not appear that they are speaking to standards?
Well, that's what I'm saying is if they're still within their 3 minutes and they're speaking on the item that they've registered to, I don't think you can force them to stop up until their 3 minutes, because the ordinance specifically says they shall get 3 minutes to speak on an item. And so you can, encourage them and that sort of a thing. But I until that ordinance changes, I don't think you could just cut them off.
Okay.
Now, if they start talking about something totally different, not the item, then you can cut them off.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't really.
That doesn't.
Any. Yeah.
Maybe it comes close. Maybe it comes close occasionally.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Attorney Strange before he has to? Thank you very much for being with us. Okay.
Sure.
Here.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Commissioner Sundquist's suggestions got me thinking, and maybe it's a crazy idea, but I as an alder, I get thousands of mass emails that overwhelm me and have no impact other than to make me angry. And so plan commissioners sometimes get some of that, and then in addition, all this 3 minute testimony. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of helping people focus their input by promoting, just for Plan Commission, if you want to give input on an issue, go to this webpage. And it's not just your name and the agenda item number, but it's like it could have a very brief list of standards of approval. It could lead them down the garden path of giving reasonable input. But I think it's like this for plan commissioners too. When we get these PDFs of strung together emails that are of varying lengths and formats, it's kind of hard to digest all of that. So if we could somehow funnel the input, not all of it probably, into a tool that created an easier to read set of input, and it might help people that want to do both write and make public comment. It might help them focus. It requires staff time to develop such a thing, I know, and probably IT work. So it wouldn't be easy, but kind of helping people recognize what they need to be addressing somehow.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make one comment, since this is semi-informal. One thing that people seem to be in agreement on that I don't know that I am, and that is reading only the register number of things on the consent agenda. And this is why I have a concern about that, is that it's difficult enough for the public to understand what in the heck's going on. And if we just read a list of agenda items and numbers that are then approved, will the public really know what it is we're doing? So that's a concern that I have about that. one of the things that Alder Rummel and I talked about was the possibility of significantly shortening what's read. So not read precisely word for word what's in there, but maybe just the address and a rezoning or whatever it is, just so that it's very short and to the point. So I would offer that as a adjustment to simply reading in the Legistar number. I see a couple of thumbs up and head shakes on that. Does that make sense to people? Okay. The person that's not shaking their head yet is Commissioner Sundquist. Did you want to say something about that?
I'm going to be, I don't know, the anti-democratic person again. I don't think very many people show up to out of the blue and want to hear, get their information by you reading the addresses. I think you could put it on the screen or something while we're on Zoom, or when we're in the council chambers, you could show it on the screen behind you or something so people could read it. But I honestly don't think it adds much at all. It really nothing for in a practical way. That I understand the impetus, but I don't know. It's just my view. I don't think anybody's going to get anything out of even anything more than the legislature.
The thing that I would mention to that is I know I have, and this was when I was Alder, primarily people coming about a particular agenda item, and I see them there after it's been passed on the consent agenda and going over, and they don't catch it. So I think that we do have some people that are interested in what happens to, whatever, and they don't know when they tune in whether or not it's going to be on the consent agenda. And so, again, I think that a kind of shortening, but I would be really hesitant to cut it down to nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Spencer.
I guess I just had more of a comment and a question. When I look at the items on the agenda and I'm reading the staff comments, and I do notice if the staff recommends it or not. And then during the meeting, I do put a lot of weight into what the alderperson, has to say, assuming that they've had some contact with the developers and the neighborhood groups. And I have sort of, I probably shouldn't, but I've sort of come under the assumption that the developers have held information sessions, meetings with the neighborhood groups, meetings with the alders, and that these projects have been vetted and discussed. And I'm kind of surprised when, they're not, or people come to the meetings and said, I didn't know anything about this, development or this meeting coming up. And so I just wanted to comment on that and get a sense from the alders that are here. Are there a lot, are there neighborhood meetings where they're collecting input? Can I rely on that? Thoughts?
I'll just make a quick comment, having been an alder and then going to our other alder here. It's virtually impossible to get the word out to everybody. I mean, you can put it out on listservs, you can send out postcards, but that doesn't mean, people chuck the postcards away without even looking. They get junk mail, and they aren't necessarily on the listserv. So often people will say that legitimately. And then the other thing that can be an issue is you can have multiple meetings. People can go to them. And sometimes the developer is responsive and really is trying to work with the neighborhood. Sometimes they are checking the box that they've had the meeting, and they make virtually no concessions, I guess I would say, to anything that the neighborhood is bringing up. So you get the range. You can't assume anything in terms of people having known in advance, and for good reasons. And it's not the alder's fault. It's not the developer's fault. It's that people are overwhelmed with stuff. So you can't assume that, and you can't assume that the developer has made a good faith effort to address the things. Some cases, yes. Some cases, they're just waiting it out. So, Alder Heck, do you want to comment about that?
Just one more thought. So, for instance, with the Langdon Street proposal, I started that neighborhood engagement process, and I'm thinking, okay, students, they don't often participate in neighborhood association things, and there isn't a neighborhood association associated with most of campus. So I sent out 1,200 postcards for a neighborhood meeting. 0 students showed up. That's just not how you communicate. You can't just send a postcard and assume that's going to work. So there's a lot that needs to be done, I think, in terms of engagement and things. And planning staff, to their credit, recognizes this and have been thinking outside the box a lot in recent years. But for alders, we don't really have many tools, and so we're going to have to rethink some of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Sundquist, your hand's up, but I don't know whether that was from before or not. Okay. Okay. Other comments? I would. There was one other thing that. Oh, completeness of applications. Heather, that came up. Is that something that you could talk to? Okay.
Yeah, briefly, and then again, open it up for Kevin or Tim also. So one of the things that we do as staff working with zoning administrator and others in zoning is to make sure that an application is complete. We have a very detailed application checklist for each application coming in, and applications do need to be complete in order to be routed to other agencies for review and scheduled for these meetings. But some of the elements that have become expected by both Urban Design and Plan Commission are somewhat discretionary, like shadow studies, like transportation demand management plans, traffic impact analyses. Sometimes for projects that at the staff level, we wouldn't flag it as needing to have a traffic impact analysis. An alder will later say, weeks into the review, they'll say, well, we want a TIA or traffic impact analysis for this one because of things they're hearing from their constituents. And so it might appear by the time that it gets to Plan Commission that it's not complete, but I would say it's extremely rare that an application would get to Plan Commission without the bare necessities that are required for it to be at Plan Commission. Also, I wanted to note that recently, as we've experienced transportation demand management becoming more and more prominent in our discussions, we certainly have strongly advised applicants to get those in as early as possible so that they can be reviewed adequately. And, in one case, even strongly encourage an applicant to request referral so that they can have more time to prepare one. So I think we are working really hard on that front to make sure that not only are applications technically complete, which they must be in order to move through, but also that we're trying to foresee elements that may arise and advise applicants accordingly to try to get those items in as soon as they can so that they're, as complete as possible when they get to the Plan Commission. Kevin or Tim, anything to add on that?
Kevin.
No, I think that's, I think you did a really good summary of that. The term completeness review, just to elaborate a little bit, it's defined in the zoning code, and that's actually a call that the zoning administrator has to make to accept an application. So there is a completeness review requirement that's, as Heather had said. I think the issue, again, as Heather said, kind of at a project by project basis, TDM, for example, after the Hill Farms discussion and the desire for a more detailed TDM, we've used it as a model for other PDs where TDMs could be required. That the zoning ordinance says the Plan Commission may require a TDM. And so for another project that you'll be seeing on Monday, there's a TDM that was submitted, and that was part of the referral, as Heather mentioned. But those are on case by cases, and a lot of these are shoulds, not shalls in the code. I think going forward, if there's more specificity about certain types of when a shadow study would be required, or revisiting when a TDM would be required, not just suggested. And if it's set in the code, we would absolutely enforce it. So I think, taking note of, if there's areas that the commission, outside of this discussion, obviously, but if there's areas that the Plan Commission sees routinely that, this type of, or this level of information is helpful, that we can do a code amendment to get those requirements in. But as it stands right now, a lot of them are shoulds and not shalls. And we definitely try to work with the development team to get as much information as we can. You guys have necessary information.
So, Kevin, on things that you, based upon your experience and knowledge of what concerns are of Plan Commission, do you strongly encourage like a TDM and warn the developer that may be something that the commission might end up referring if they don't have it?
Yes. I mean, I think as of recently, when this has kind of risen to a significant discussion point from the Plan Commission, we urged that information to be provided in advance. I think the information, because we have in that case, we had a technically complete application. Then we're mentioning to the applicant, this is how the discussion went at previous meetings, other boards, commissions, referrals. This is the standard that allows the Plan Commission to request this. And just in the interest of trying to help the Plan Commission have what they have, we would strongly encourage that. Similarly, for shadow studies, that's the other issue that's been brought up. When we're dealing with additional height, that is something that we try to flag if we believe that those bonus stories or height considerations, where it's spelled out in the code, we oftentimes will try to make sure that we have some information to the Plan Commission so they can evaluate it. Again, going back to the standards, they talk, some of the bonus height talk about the shadow impacts as one of the considerations. So yes, we try to do that. And sometimes issues pop up in a project that we didn't anticipate. That the discussion, that the concerns either that were brought up by neighbors or by Plan Commissioners, and so once we're aware of that, we use a lot of precedent when we're advising Plan Commission and say, well, here's a similar case, and this is what the Plan Commission asked for, and so this would be advised that this is the level of detail that we think might be necessary to answer some of the review questions.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have of staff is, it was suggested that we have some kind of a tool to help the public give good input, and it was mentioned like a web page or something like that. And I'm just wondering what the reaction might be.
I'll start since I didn't mute myself, but Heather can chime in now. So,
Okay.
No, I think that's fine. We do that in our pre-application discussions, and we talk generally about what to expect at the hearing. And we generally, I know when I advise applicants, I talk about what I believe is effective testimony, and it's always tied to the standards.
Well, I'm talking about members of the public. That's
right.
What I understood. Generally.
Right. No, similarly, we don't get this question as often, I would say, from the public, but when they're contacted, I've certainly encouraged it. That said, we haven't taken it as far, and we could talk about it offline. We don't have a guide. These are tips to present an effective Plan Commission presentation. We don't have a written document. I think it's more so we've done when we've been contacted and people ask how to share comments with the Plan Commission. So it has been done, just we don't have a formal document that we've developed.
Okay. I don't see any raised hands. I was just going to go through the list of things and the things that I have noted down. and give you what my perception is based upon what people have said. And I would like to invite you then to say, not me, I don't want that, or yes, that's great. So the first item is traditional legislative approach. It seemed to be that the majority of people did not like that. Just to note, Alder Lemmer said that she liked that one a lot. So just to share that with you. Then item 2, limit lengthy items on the agenda. And I think we have general consensus that that we really want staff to work to not have, several, any more than one, if possible, item that they know is going to be lengthy on the same agenda. Then item 3 was 1 intake deadline per month. And it seemed like there was consensus that that would be good for staff to explore, understanding that there may be some roadblocks that would make that difficult, but that it seems that that would allow the balancing of agendas better. Then 4 was limit informational non-action items to 30 minutes. There seemed to be a general thought that those things are the most policy heavy, really, things, and some reluctance in limiting those. That said, typically they haven't been, that long. So I think that my sense is that the consensus is that they should be as compact in terms of the presentation as possible, but that we shouldn't shortchange ourselves basically on those important policy kinds of things. Is that, yeah, okay. And then 5, limit time commissioners can talk. And in general, my consensus, it seemed like people were saying that that doesn't seem to really be a problem. In some cases, but it's relatively unusual, a commissioner may spend more time on something, but that there usually is a good reason for that. Having a hard end time, the consensus seemed to be no, but having a request or asking for an end motion at, say, 10:30 might make some sense. Now, I would say I was on a city committee that had an end time at 7, and then a motion if it was going to be extended beyond that. Never did it end at 7 because of having that end time. So personally, I would be really surprised if I asked for a motion at 10:30 to adjourn, that would happen. Just my general comment. Auto referral of long items. I at first thought that, that sounds pretty good, but I agree with, and this was a concern of staff, and I think it could happen, is that there would be some people who might gather enough people together to push that referral. So in general, I think that there was agreement that that's not a good idea. Extra meeting, no, unless absolutely necessary to make life bearable, but that it would be really an unusual situation, that should not be in any way routine. Earlier start time, no, because of wanting to have commissioners who work during the day be able to continue being commissioners, but also members of the public who might want to watch or testify, that really wouldn't work. enforce the 3-minute rule, and I have been doing that the last several meetings. I don't think myself that we need some kind of shot clock or something. I mean, I think it should be up to the speakers to know what their time is. Grouping questions at the end of public testimony. And again, I've been doing that then recently, and there seems to be agreement to continue doing that. Don't read consent items. And I'm very open to severely shortening those, but I would object to just doing the Legistar number. And then the whole issue of trying to get better public input and engagement. And right now, there doesn't seem to be a readily apparent way to do that. We've got the 3 minutes that's in ordinance. But I do think that that is a really good point, because we do end up with duplicative testimony that often does not add to the information that we would use to make a decision. So I would really like for commissioners and staff to think some more about that. If there is some kind of a format that could be provided to neighborhood associations to encourage people to speak to the standards and to encourage the not repeating things. And maybe it is in some way doing the grouping. And that's the other thing I was going to say is commissioners seem to want to group the developer commentary. I agree in part, but I do have that kind of fairness issue with the members of the public. So if we can, I think we can go ahead, although it's more difficult with the Zoom to group developers because they come where they come. And so I've been doing one developer at the beginning who they say, but they're sprinkled throughout the list. So it'll be a challenge, to do that in Zoom. But if we do that, and along with trying to get a more cohesive communication from the public, let's think about how we can encourage that kind of cohesive presentation, maybe from neighborhood associations or the public. A challenge to do that in the kind of fragmented way that our democracy tends to work. And I, based upon what Attorney Strange said and the manner of public input, it right now anyway would be not possible to cut people off unless they're going totally off of what the agenda item is. Does that kind of summarize where we are? Anything? Okay, thank you. Stouter.
Yeah, just one quick question. And Tim brought this up. I think someone had mentioned the concept of adding an informal time limit to the answers of questions. So when a development team is asked a question, it's just something else we could consider. It would be something we'd need to put in the policy manual that's, not from ordinance, but would we want to consider like a 1 or 2 minute limit on, answering questions. I don't know that we run into that, every meeting, but it could be helpful.
I know that I think it was the last meeting, I ended up cutting somebody off because they just went, okay. And so how do people feel about that? Would you shake your head yes if you think it's a good idea? Shake your head no if you think it's a bad idea? Okay, I saw some. I didn't see any like this, but two like this. Okay, so what I'm thinking is we will bring back to you then, because we aren't making any final decisions tonight, bring back to you then the things that we are either going to move forward on or explore further with the idea of hopefully then bringing those forward. Some things will, as Heather mentioned, require a change in our policy and procedure manual. Does that sound like a good way forward then? Okay. Any other comments from commissioners or staff? Commissioner Hagenow.
Thank you, Chair. I just, when we were talking about possibly like this web page idea, maybe, or this guide for the public for how to give their input to us. I'm sure this would be a technological nightmare, I would imagine, for our IT department. But I was just thinking of some way for public to give 3-minute testimony outside of the actual public hearing, like through a web page that may have the agenda item up there. Right now a lot of times we get these long emails, but I would imagine that would take up just massive amounts of storage space, and we may not be able to do something like that. But that was just a thought that kind of popped into my head while we were talking about that. So I figured I'd throw it out there. That's it.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thanks. I'll say this on Jesse's behalf. I've on other committees and things that I've asked several times in recent months for, could we do this new thing or this other new thing? And IT always comes back with, because of the pandemic, we're just swamped, and we don't really have the capacity to develop new tools at this time. Jesse can say differently, and that would be wonderful. But that's kind of my impression. And even something as simple as a web form, and where does that information go and how is it distributed is kind of a process for them. So if we did try to do something along those lines, it would probably have to be later rather than sooner.
Did you have anything, Jesse, that you wanted to say, or basically just agree?
Yeah, I can sort of agree on that. I don't know if I'm the person to be speaking specifically on. Okay. Yeah, I think there would be hurdles as far as where it would be stored, things like that. Just thinking off the top of my head, something like that could, at some point, maybe we could look into facilitating the videos in a way like that. Short term, if someone wanted to do that, I don't see why they couldn't record that, say, to a free service like YouTube, and then send that link in the email, and then they have a video of that. That's kind of like the short term solution. They weren't able to make the Zoom meeting or something like that, but they still wanted to do something, like a video. But
okay, thank you, Jesse. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Commissioner Hagenow. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Heck. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a hand raised to object. So thank you, everybody. It's 6 o'clock. That's pretty good. Thank you all really very much. Take care.